Well, what do we do now? Good evening. I know some of you, and I don't know others. So I'm just going to ask you guys, because you found out about this, what do you actually know about what I'm going to talk about, or us? Do you know anything about us?
Yes, we're kind of in on it.
So do you know about this paper?
You know about this, I just read through.
Only recently,
Yeah,
I didn't know you had a paper. I've heard
Right.
you speak several times before.
Okay.
Yeah. We've been to the alternative view conferences, so
We've heard you
heard you
there.
there.
Okay, all right, excellent. Well, we've got a very friendly group then, so we'll make this very chatty. It's 97 in Plymouth, and I had trouble with one of these projects, which is,
Discover common purpose.
and that was common purpose and all the rest of it. Well, what I'm going to do tonight is I want to explain, or try and explain, what is actually going on around us and how things are being done, and it absolutely affects decision making. Why people are making the decisions they are, why a lot of them are very strange decisions, and ultimately where it's going to take us. And it's always tricky for me because I've done a lot of talks. Every time you do a talk, people expect you to do something which is new and fresh and different. And for a while, I've been thinking, how do I cover some of this subject in a different way so that we can show people what's going on? And I couldn't find the way. And then in the last couple of weeks, a whole series of little things happened that I thought, bang, this is what we should do. So you're going to be the guinea pigs tonight. So the start here is this gentleman fishing. And the key bit is he's fishing with a net. So we can go out there with a bit of bait on a hook, or you can go out with a fishing net. And the simple idea is that you're going to trap the fish in the net. And I believe this is pretty skillful because they have to sort of spin it out over the water. So this leads us on to fishing nets, really. And there are lots of different types of fishing nets. There's heavy-duty trawls with more or less huge, great ropes. Or we can get a lot finer nets, some of them huge, miles long. I know a bit about it because I did some of the fishery protection work in the Navy. So if you talk about fishing nets, there's different styles, but they all do the same job ultimately, which is they're going to trap something. So I thought I'd just get us thinking about what a fishing net looks like. This is one of the modern monofilament ones, and these things start to get interesting because the nylon fibres are so fine that in some of the fishing nets, when it's in the water, you really can't see it at all. Whereas other fishing nets, as the net comes through the water, the fish see it and then try and escape it. With some of the filaments, they can't see it and they get enmeshed in it. So for the fish, it's a problem because if they can't see it, something's going to happen. So here we've got some poor fish caught in the net. That's one fish, but it doesn't have to be one fish because it could be something like this. When I was doing the fishery protection, which was 1992, 93, a lot of the fishermen up in Scotland talked about two purse seine trawlers that basically, or purse seine fishing boats, where one of these boats had caught 1,000 tons of herring in one haul. There was no way they could get those fish on board. It was something like this. So what they do is they bring the net in close to the fishing boat and then they put a big tube in and they suck the fish out. But 1,000 tons. So if you get an effective fishing net, you are hoovering fish out the ocean. So fishing nets are pretty dangerous to fish. And we come back to this business that what you see with the net depends on where you are. So this is okay, you can see that this is a mesh, but if you get from maybe a different angle, is this a mesh? You can't necessarily see it. It's still part of a fishing net, but if you can't see the whole thing, you don't really understand what you're looking at. So maybe that's a bit of a fish's view. We jump away from that for a minute, but I just got you thinking about that. This was part of early research that I did when I'd come to the conclusion that something wasn't right in the country. And the main bit was in my brain, this is what our world was supposed to be. So if we needed something done at local level, we were going to try and talk to the parish council. I've been a parish councillor for 6 years. I know that you don't get any rewards for it. I think I did get 2 thank you letters, and all the rest are, why don't we do this and that? But in principle, these people are supposed to be looking after us, and if somebody down here doesn't do it, there's somebody above them who should be saying, do your job. But what I started to realise is that there was almost a parallel system that had been created. And the first one that I started to pay attention to was this area here, regional development agencies. South West of England Regional Development Agency in Plymouth. And we'd also got regional assemblies. And most of this started to pop out the woodwork as the European Union started to sort of show its face. But other things started to happen. These government offices were set up, government offices of the region. And we also, for the first time, had this beast here, which was the office of the Deputy Prime Minister. And Mr. Prescott was in charge of this. And if you think about it, if we'd never had that before, why all of a sudden did we need this office of the Deputy Prime Minister? Now, most people were focused on Tony Blair, because he came in, didn't he? He was from Queens and he said, trust me. And he was the sort of suave young guy, and everybody else said that Prescott was a bit of a buffoon. So they didn't really pay attention to what John Prescott was doing. But it was very significant. They set up a whole office for him. And actually, the staff that he had access to was huge. And I'm going to say that John Prescott is an idiot in some ways, but he's not a fool. And if you set him a task, he does the task. And I actually think he's a very dangerous man. So he was given tremendous power as Deputy Prime Minister, but nobody took any notice to what he was doing. Now, about the same time, we're really going back to the late 90s for this, there was a whole range of these quangos set up, quasi-autonomous non-governmental organisations. Now, most people had never heard of them before, they didn't even know really what they were, but they were bodies that the government created, but they said they're arm's length bodies. They're nothing really to do with central government, but they're there to help ordinary people. So they're there to help local communities, they're there to help regenerate cities. And the amazing thing was that it wasn't just a few of them in each city, it was thousands of them. And that figure there is correct. At about 2006, you're talking about 8,500 of them. Now, you might like to think about this in terms of the fact that the government is saying that there's no money. And Mike Robinson, in the latest edition of the paper, has produced some graphs showing that the government has continued to spend more and more and more and more public money each year. But it's not coming down into the communities. Where's it going? Well, a lot of it went into these quangos, and the quangos were then starting to do things underneath, a bit like the roots of a tree. Now, this was early work for me, and if I looked at the problem, I kept coming back to the fact that this seemed to come in on EU stuff. So I'm going to say this is what I looked at. Most of it's correct, but my focus was on the European Union, and that was actually wrong. I was also looking at this stuff in more detail. So here's the sort of right-hand side broken down into more detail. Office of the Deputy Prime Minister, Government Office of the Regional Assemblies. We've got something else here, 170,000 charities in this country. Now, my logic says if all those charities were being charitable, we wouldn't have any problems, would we? But what you discover is that those 170 charities have got a minimum budget of £44 billion. So you can check this yourself. It's way over that now, because that was correct at 2006 or 5, something around there. So in the middle of our society, aside from the 8,500 quangos, we've also got these 170,000 charities. But when you looked at the charities, and you look at where their funding is coming from, a lot of them are not charities. They're being funded by, a lot of it, by government money and or private money coming in through trusts. Okay? So you then, or at this stage, I was really into what are these things doing and where have they suddenly come from? Because we're seeing them all over the place. Now the other thing I've been looking at was common purpose. And if I go back to sort of 96, when it was really, I was digging into common purpose. Common purpose said it was a charity, an educational charity. It was helping rejuvenate societies. It was empowering people. It was helping people to become future leaders. And it was saying that they should be able to lead outside their authority. So much the same as they're doing now. But when I had a look at the common purpose, I suddenly found that it was linked in with this network of other stuff, of which Demos was very interesting, because Demos' origins are Marxist. And David and Ed Miliband from the Labour Party, their father, I've forgotten his first name now, I think he's another Ed, but he was connected with the not only Marxism today, but also the helping the setup of Demos.
He's Belgian too, isn't he?
Pardon?
He's Belgian.
Yes, yeah, he came here as an immigrant to escape the war, basically. So Julia Middleton, the chief executive of Common Purpose, helped set up Demos. Demos is a Marxist-based organisation, and I'm going to say I'm ex-military from the Cold War, and one of the things I think I was pretty well trained in is the Marxist ideology. So I got curious as to what they were up against. Tavistock Institute, playing around with people's minds. Council of Foreign Relations, we're getting into bigger stuff here, but these people are suggesting that the world could be run on better lines, I'm going to say simplistically, with a one world government. Now this was quite interesting, an organisation called the Work Foundation. Previously it was the Industrial Society. Julia Middleton had been involved in it, and they were running a project called Tomorrow Project, and there was a 2020 vision project, and there were these things called longitudinal studies. And when I looked at the longitudinal studies, what they were actually doing was looking at families over many years and several generations. Here was family X in the 50s. What were their jobs? What was their income? What was their health? Follow it all the way through. Here's the family, 3 generations. What's their health like? What's their income? And I thought, this is like people are laboratory rats. They're being watched and measured to see how they're changing. And then good old Common Purpose was running a load of courses, of which in the Plymouth area, the Matrix course was swallowing up people. So I was there in Plymouth in business. I was not only a member of the Chamber of Commerce, I was one of the directors. So you have board meetings of a company, Plymouth Chamber of Commerce. I'd never heard of Common Purpose, yet I then discovered that several members of the board were Common Purpose trained. And then I discovered they're in the police and in the hospitals and all over the place, never heard of them. So you've got a charity running an educational system, but it's quasi-secret, nobody knows about them. So I began to see that this lot, I'm going to say simplistically, were up to something. But I didn't quite know what they were doing. Now the other bit that was pretty obvious to me was corruption associated not only to government funding pots, but also European money. And in Plymouth, as big dollops of government money came in, and the one that I watched most was New Deal for Communities. This is the 25 million that came into Devonport. It was not being properly accounted for. It was being divided up into pots inside the city council so that you couldn't really see where the sum was. And then it was divided up into smaller amounts of money and given out to strange people and strange projects. And I can tell you for a fact, one couple had their wedding reception paid for out of New Deal money in Devonport. Other members of the community started to see this money going in people's pockets, when they complained, they started to be victimised and bullied. And this is where it got interesting for me, because you're saying, well, hang on a minute, people are trying to say, whoa, this is fraud. What happens is they get victimised. Now, if I jump on a bit, a man contacted me from Sheffield, having seen part of my website then, and he said, what you're talking about, we've got happening in Sheffield. Massive amounts of public money literally being misappropriated and stolen, and when you stand up and try and do something about it, they come for you. And that man called Martin, who's fantastic what he's still doing, he should know what he was talking about because he's an auditor himself. He got all the evidence together, went to Bob Kersley, who was the then head of Sheffield City Council, and within a few weeks all sorts of stuff is happening, including them trying to section him. And the only reason they weren't able to section him was the lady psychiatrist who turned up on his doorstep. He had met, by sheer coincidence, a social event a couple of weeks previously. So here we are, we're standing in Buckfastleigh Town Hall. It's, what is today, 2nd of March 2013, and what am I talking to you about? I am talking about people being sectioned in Britain for trying to tell the truth. Right? This is pretty serious stuff. So this was the rabbit hole, and common purpose seemed central to me. So I started to research common purpose, and I started to speak out on it, and very quickly I got trouble. But this lady, bless her cotton socks, Julia Middleton, chief executive, her husband was involved in newspapers, Trinity Mirror, he was at the time, Rupert Middleton, and they'd been in America and they thought it was a good idea to try some of this leadership which they'd seen in America, and they came back to England in 1985, and the next minute they had £500,000 to start Common Purpose, a charity. Yeah, doesn't stack up for me. But this lady still very much in the centre of the web. Now if we have a look at one quote from her, this is 2007, 3 years before the general election. She is saying there's going to be a coalition. How does she know that? Right, now, the thing about the office of the Deputy Prime Minister under Mr Prescott was that Common Purpose was embedded in it. So it wasn't just a question that John Prescott was running that office for purely government purposes. Common Purpose was fully embedded in that office. So you had an unaccountable charity working at the heart of government, and the charity has a political agenda which it's not declaring, but there's a common purpose. Let's have a look at Mr Blair. This is a quote from him from an extract from the Centre for Policy Studies 2000, and this is what he said. He's telling you what they're doing. They're going to put in a new elite. So these are not people that are going to be elected. And a lot of the papers at the moment, across the board, are starting to say, we've got an elite in power that are totally out of touch with the ordinary people. Well, they're not out of touch, it's simply they don't care. They're a real elite, they don't care. But Tony Blair knew what was going to happen, and this photograph is pretty spot on, because these two men are literally in bed together. What did you think about that? So, just switching away from Tony Blair, we come to the Conservatives, and this is what Cameron was saying at the Scottish Party Conference on May 2009. He's waxing lyrical about the community. I'll leave you to read that. And it's this little bit at the bottom, small print. So this is all the mush about how we're going to help local communities and we're going to empower local people. And here's the reference to common purpose. We're going to give people the power and control to drive that common purpose. Common purpose is about taking power away from people, because the average person doesn't know what's happening. So, Tony Blair is a liar, Prescott is a liar, and a philanderer who brings his mistress into Parliament. These are very, very dodgy people. And they're telling us that they're going to create an elitist power base and they're going to run it on the lines of common purpose. And that is what they have done. And if we don't unscramble this, we are going to end up somewhere very unpleasant. Now this is basically what it's all about in the simplest possible way. So basically, common purpose says that any city is controlled by a small number of people. And if you can control a few of those people, you control the whole city. So my early talks were saying in Plymouth, the council leader was common purpose, the chief executive was common purpose, the head of social services, the head of planning, the head of legal services, the head of government. All these people in Plymouth were common purpose. But nobody even knew common purpose existed. And what we discovered is when we tried to report fraud and corruption, these people started to gang up on it. And it wasn't just happening in Plymouth, it was happening in other places. So, if I do it, it's like a cancer spreading down through. And of course it doesn't stop there, because common purpose was recruiting through into universities and into schools. Right? But nobody knew it was going on. So this is a network they're creating. So that's why I started off with the fishing net.
I just got a comment. I love the red stars, and I just sort of what popped into my mind was commie purpose. You know what I mean?
Well,
good way to
I did it deliberately.
It's
really,
brilliant. It's brilliant. I
yeah.
love that.
But this is the thing. This is a network. Now, going back to the 90s, when I started to talk
common
about
purpose.
common purpose, people had never heard about it. Never ever heard about it. And yet, it was entrenched in Plymouth. So, we can then say, common purpose is also working on a much bigger level. So, I'm going to leave the EU there, because the EU is still a problem. But I'll come back to the EU.
Ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Is it possible to be in the common purpose and not be aware of that bigger picture that they have?
Correct, yes, it is. Because common purpose will, in a course that they recruit, they're after keep people with power and influence, but to make it look good, they pad the courses with useful idiots. That's Julia Middleton's term, not mine. And so in Plymouth, for example, some of the companies got pretty stroppy when they found out. They'd paid £5,000 to put some of their people on a common purpose course, and then they discovered that a number of people doing exactly the same course had only paid £400. And common purpose said, oh, we've given them bursaries. But what it's really to do is make the whole thing look good. Yeah? It's deceit. Everything is on deceit. So we think we've got a democratic UK government. Underneath it, we've now got this hugely inflated public sector, massive compared to what it would be like even in the 1960s. We've got all of our society and private sector, and then we've got the children at the bottom. So what we say is very quickly, common purpose had got through into 36 cities. So it wasn't one or two. So we can say that the net had started to spread over the whole of society like this. All right? Now the other part of it is that the fishing net that's being used isn't just a net where you draw people into common purpose, because there's something really, really nasty going on. And that is, they are running networks where people are being trained using neurolinguistics. Now, neurolinguistics, you can go on the internet and research it yourself. In very simplistic terms, it's a form of mild hypnosis. It's putting people into trance. This is not trance where you're sort of unconscious asleep in the hypnotist chair. This is playing around with people's minds so that basically they don't realise the information that's being given to them. Now, you research it after tonight, but I'm going to say not only is the stuff real, it's being done on a scale which is truly breathtaking at the moment. Can I give you a simple example of doing it? And I'm not trained, trust me. Dogs. I'm going to use the hand. I've got dogs, right? And I've got a couple of spaniels, cocker spaniels, and I really like cocker spaniels. I also like collies. I think they're absolutely brilliant dogs. And I like Labradors. What else have we got? We've got Dobermans. I'm not too keen on them. And also don't like some boxers. Tony Blair. Now, I've changed from dogs to Tony Blair, but I've given you a signal. What's my signal about Tony Blair?
He's a dog.
Well, he's a Doberman side.
Yeah.
This was the nice dog side. Tony Blair's on the nasty dog side. Right? Now, I've explained it to you. All of you got it, but it was your subconscious that registered it. Right? I can tell you that because this is how it works. So, if I had been deceitful, I would have done that without talking about it. And in your mind, my message to you is that Blair is a nasty dog. Okay? But I would not have been honest because I've used a technique to get it into your head. If you speak to a highly trained NLP person, they will say, give me somebody in a room with no windows for 40 minutes. They won't even remember what school they've gone to. This stuff is real. You can go on the internet and you can go to NLP consultancies where the really nasty ones say to blokes, you want to get a woman into bed, learn NLP. Right? It's vicious. Now, there are a lot of people trained in it who did the training in order to help people. I'm going to use the term psychotherapist. The problem is that the training is experiential. So if you go somewhere to learn how to use NLP or CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, the trainers say, if you want to really know what it's like for the people you're going to help, we need to show you how it's done. So they give them a dose. Okay? Now, if everybody in that system is honest, trustworthy, moral, okay, you can train people to use this to help other people. But if you've got people in this network whose agenda is vicious, political, and totally immoral, you've got a problem. The common purpose, as one organisation, is using NLP on people. So when people do a course, they're being given instructions, they're having views and values changed, but they don't realise they're being changed. Common purpose is not the only one, so basically what I did is say, imagine now another part of the fishing net, which is all the organisations pushing out NLP. And we are in the middle here somewhere. And it's getting confusing, isn't it? Now, think about the weird stories you've read in the paper. A policeman who wouldn't go into 18 inches of water to rescue somebody. Do you remember that? A man drowned in the pond. And they said, we can't go in the water because health and safety. Right? There was a policeman who would not get on a bike for a photo shoot because he said he hadn't done his bike safety course. And the papers laughed at him and said it was ridiculous. Not ridiculous. In that policeman's brain, he shouldn't get on the bike because he hadn't done his course. Right? He's been done. He's not using common sense. He's using a programmed thought process. Right? And if you watch the press, there are more and more instances where you say, what? It's not nonsense. These people have had things done. So we've now got a net starting to close in around us with these techniques. And most people can't see it. And I'm going to say, if you're the fish, you can't escape unless you can see the net. So, come in a slightly different angle. What should society be like? Well, we're usually at the bottom of the pile. And here's the regime again we're used to. These people have popped up. Now you can put this into Google and look at some of the stuff. Who are the change agents? Well, Demos is a big one. So I'm just flagging that up as one for you to look at. But have you heard of any of these? So Tavistock, Demos, Common Purpose, Media Standards Trust, Joseph Rowntree, Work Foundation, Public Policy Research, the Sayed Business School, Adam Smith Institute, Fabian Society, right? That is about 1/10 of the number I could have put up. They're all being funded. And when you say, who are these people? Well, never mind who they are, look at what they're doing. They're pushing an agenda through. What should be taught to children in schools? What the sex education should be? What should be happening in the public sector? What should be happening in health and safety? What should be happening in immigration? It's not coming out of Parliament, it's coming through all these people. And when you say who funds these people, you always come back to the same thing. International banks or private family banks, Rothschilds, Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, well they've gone bankrupt now, but they were in there. Now these people are absolutely what they say. Their agenda is to change society. And probably the one, if you haven't come across it before, lost it, it's in here, is the Fabian Society. Is an old one, because it was very powerful. Right? Tony Blair is chairman of the Fabian Society. The Fabian Society motto and logo is what?
Wolf in sheep's
It's
clothing.
wolf in sheep's clothing.
With two men hammering the earth into shape. Yeah.
Yeah. So their agenda is hidden, it's subversive. Right? They're the wolf, but they're in the sheep's clothing. So this lot are pushing policy into this massive inflated third sector. This is the minimum it is. The Tories said they were going to get rid of some of these departments, but actually it's increased. Right? And basically all the poo is dropping on us. So instead of these people directly accountable to us setting the policy, it's actually coming through these guys. It's best I could do, sideways net. Yeah? But you get the idea. Now, can I prove some of this to you? Well, Leveson was the best one because we had been watching this Leveson inquiry building, and what we were interested in, of course, is apart from Leveson, is this man, Sir David Bell, Chair of Trustees of Common Purpose, and he was part of the Media Standards Trust, which was one of those change agents calling for change in what was happening in the press. And then the next minute, he's on Leveson's board. And everybody we were looking at was Common Purpose. Do you know who this lady is? Shami Chakrabarti, head of Liberty. Do you know anything about Liberty? Right? It's an organisation which says it's to protect our liberty, but they took money from the Gaddafi regime. Correction. She was on the board of London School of Economics when London School of Economics took the money. So we might say this is a bit hypocritical. But Liberty, when it was originally called the National Council for Civil Liberties, was directly linked to two pro-paedophile organisations. Paedophile Information Exchange and Paedophile Action for Liberty. And there were two members of Parliament also linked to the National Council for Civil Liberties. One was Harriet Harman, and the other lady I always forget, but it'll come back to me in a minute. And Harriet Harman signed documents calling for it to be legal for people to take pornographic pictures of children. Fact, no ifs or buts. So, this is a very interesting lady. Here's the main man of Common Purpose. And what was this lot doing, starting to control the press? Now, a lot of it broke into the papers. The Daily Mail published 11 pages. The Telegraph published on it. I think this is the Telegraph picture. The Times published on it, and so did the Guardian. And what they said is there's a network of people operating, and they've all got vested interest. And it was a horrible mixture, because obviously we've got people in the justice system here. We've got Sir David Bell. he was on board the Media Standards Trust over here with Julia Middleton. They started a campaign group campaigning for change with control of the media. They were linked into police. This is a common purpose trained policewoman. And so it wasn't long before the press had actually picked up on the fact there's a cabal of people operating, but the average person just can't see the network that they're operating in. And the Sun did the same idea, very powerful, just showing all of these people linked together in a network. But this is interesting, because that network extended into the BBC, and it extended into the Guardian, not only because the so-called raw exposure of Lord Ashcroft was done at the British Institute of Journalism, BIJ, but actually the Scott Trust was also putting money into that and to the Media Standards Trust. Now the Scott Trust runs the Guardian. This is what I would call a subversive network of people. It's got a deeply political agenda. These people want to control the press. Why do they want to control the press? To shut up anybody who's putting a finger on them.
Is that picture there given by one of the papers?
Yeah, that was in the Sun.
And that's
That was
just a copy of it.
That's a double-page spread from the Sun.
Brilliant. It's good, isn't it?
Yeah. Now I'm going to say the Mail used 85% of UK column information to run its 11 pages.
Great.
It was great. It would have been nice if they'd have said thank you, but we pushed it out for somebody to use. Right? So at the moment, I'm not going to spend too long on this, but what does this man want? He wants utter control of the press and media. And if you look at what they're doing on the libel laws at the moment, they're trying to get juries out of libel cases so that libel cases can be heard behind closed doors.
Juries altogether.
Yeah, Julia Middleton threatened me with a solicitor's letter that I was libeling and slandering common purpose, and they were basically given a come on then, let's go for it, and we didn't hear anything else from them. Right? But this lot has now come out, which makes the job easier. Now, what is common purpose about? It builds a network, which we don't know about, to control political agenda and public agenda, but it's also doing something else. And I'm going to show you this lady as one example. So she's absolutely common purpose up to the eyeballs. And what she was originally doing was she was the chief executive of Birmingham City Council. And while she was there, the council degenerated into chaos. Such chaos that in the election, it was described as a banana republic for electoral fraud. The rule book has been thrown out the window. That was an official statement. And eventually the pressure on this woman was so great, she left. Well, where did she go? They made her chief executive of the border agency. What happened to the border agency?
They were complete madness.
Unfit for
Chaos. Not only did nobody know who was coming in, okay, it was such chaos.
It was deliberate.
Yes.
Yeah.
These people are
Keep them up.
deliberately collapsing the country. And this is what Blair is doing, it's what Clegg is doing, it's what Cameron is doing. They are collapsing the country. And I'll explain why in a minute. But here she is in the border agency, presided over years of chaos at the UK border agency. This is part of the comment. The Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigrants report has shown that assurances given by senior UK BA officials to the Home Affairs Select Committee about security checks in cases and the size of them appear to be incorrect. Somebody's lying. Now, when you get people with a subversive political agenda who are also lying, you've got a very dangerous combination. How many people have died in the NHS recently? Thousands. And I meant to bring it, the front page of the Mail today. Has everybody seen it? A woman's come forward and said she was recruited by an NHS trust, and very quickly they wanted her to massage the figures of deaths to cover them up. So we're in Britain in 2013 where people who are too outspoken are being sectioned. And remind me to tell you about the phone call I had on the way here. And basically, officials are lying to cover up death. So where did she go? She was promoted. Well, we all know what transport systems are like at the moment. So when she'd done transport, where would you send this lady?
Oh,
I'll show you.
Obvious.
Okay?
Everyone's at it.
Right? Now, Starbucks was a load of nonsense to keep people's eye off the ball. Starbucks did, they only paid 8 million in corporation tax. Starbucks, minuscule for what's going on, because these people are stripping the country of money and assets. Right? But she's not an idiot. She's doing a job. She's getting into things and collapsing it from the inside. NHS being collapsed from the inside. Military being collapsed.
We saw that in this hall, actually, some people from the health and the things they're trying to do here.
Yeah.
Is obvious.
So I could give you lots of examples of high-level people, but I've got a quote here. Sir Gus O'Donnell, who was the head of the civil service, welcomed the announcement and said a wealth of experience working in public service would allow Homer to excel in their new role. Well, you're laughing, of course. Pardon? Sort of. Right, now common purpose, we're just a little bit more on it. It's a very nasty organisation. This was common purpose, absolutely breaching all of the data protection rules, collecting the names of people who were asking perfectly legitimate questions about how much public bodies had spent on common purpose. And they created a blacklist where they put a lot of detail, including home addresses of people. Right? My name was on this list.
How did you get hold of this list?
Because somebody put in a freedom of access, freedom of information access. They knew what they were after, so they asked the authority for a copy of the list, and they got it. And then, of course, when we got the list, you got an insight into how devious and nasty this organisation is. The Daily Mail, when it printed the 11 pages on common purpose, actually talked about the blacklist. They didn't show this, but I'm giving you a copy of it. So information was passed between government departments and common purpose, including between graduates of common purpose and the Information Commissioner's Office.
It's like the KGB, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'll come back to me. My background, all of my military training was Cold War time. And you look at this, and this is nasty. This is East Germany. Now, what else can we show you? If you want to see it afterwards, I'll blow that up. But this is an email which Common Purpose circulated. And all of a sudden, after we said you're messing around with people's heads, the word programs is not to be used now. You've got to substitute courses. And there will no longer be any leading beyond authority in the courses offered by Common Purpose. Why was that? Because we're saying this is what these people are doing. Yeah? You've got a police woman, Cressida Dick, who's now head of anti-terrorism. She's not worried about policing in the UK. She's trying to change the world. Dangerous stuff, and it's easy to prove. And this is where we get into the higher level lying up. This is a document out of the Cabinet Office where they deliberately changed the notes, the minutes of a meeting to hide what they were doing. And this is the key bit. In the minutes they first released to the public, it said running workshops for the top 200 civil servants under the Common Purpose model was proposed. Committee members agreed to consider the costs. But actually, this is what the real minutes were. David Bell and Helen Ghosh agreed to consider the costs. Well, that's insider dealing, because David Bell was the head of Common Purpose Trustees, and he was going to decide how much his organisation was going to be paid to do the training. Francis Ward has consistently lied and refused to release the details of the contract. Why? Because he knows if he releases them, the whole bubble's blown. In my opinion, Francis Moore has absolutely lied through his teeth to cover this up. Here's a letter which he sent to Robert Green, if you know that man, where Robert said, well, do you remember the meeting? I do not recollect a meeting. I cannot say definitely that it did not happen, but I have no recollection of such a meeting. Lying bastard. Right? Why? Because he can't admit this, because if he admits it, what it shows is that the charity, Common Purpose, is controlling political policy at the heart of government. That's a quote fairly recent from Nicholas Bowles MP. What do you see and feel out there in the country at the moment? A sense of breakdown.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Yeah. They're telling you what they're doing. Eric Pickles has used the word revolution, right? But this is very interesting. Yeah, good effects. Chaotic, therefore, in our vocabulary is a good thing. Makes sense to me. And I'll emphasise it. But isn't one of them? Because there's another one here. Right. Now the reason, when I saw this, it just leaps off the page. Creative destruction. Under the Marxist model, before you can create the new world, the socialist model, you have to destroy the old. So this is Marxism, creative destruction. Right? This is not coming out of left-wing old Labour people. This is coming out of the heart of the Tory party. Why? There's no difference in the parties. Cameron, utter liar. Francis Moore, a liar. Clegg, well, we're seeing not only is he a liar, he's prepared to lie to cover up abuse, isn't he? And these people are now running the country. And you're telling me you can see the chaos. Now something else is going on which is nasty. Alongside and embedded in the big society, I'll talk about that in a minute, Public Service Broadcasting Trust mobilises individuals in large numbers to participate in civil society democracy, using mass media, appealing to people's self-interest, nudges them to take positive social action, reports back to government, third sector. Right? This is the BBC and the ITV running applied behavioural psychology, which is what nudging is. And this stuff is unbelievably sophisticated, particularly for people who are intelligent. If you're sitting there thinking, I'm too intelligent for me, I've got to look up in here somewhere, because I may pick somebody and say they're intelligent and they're not, or the other way around. Okay, so if you're intelligent and you've got a mind that sucks in information, this stuff is really dangerous. If you drink 6 pints of Guinness a night, follow the horses and football, you're focused there, you're a bit difficult to get. Children sucking information like sponges. Children you can get no time at all. Right? But they're pumping out stuff on radio stations to change people's behaviour. And the government is so confident this is working. Did anybody see the headline in the paper where they were selling the techniques to Australia?
Don't get papers, don't watch the news,
Well,
don't have TV.
brilliant, but I'm going to say if you want to track some of this stuff, you've got to give a bit. Yeah.
I get it all from the internet, actually.
Well, that's fine. You check it up, you'll find the British government boasting that it was selling nudge technology, which is applied behavioural science, to Australia. Now, I'm going to give you some good news, because I'm watching the faces, and they're all going a bit grey at the moment, but this is a heavy subject. In South Wales, there is a massive increase in young people committing suicide. Right? The papers reported it for a while and then stopped reporting it, and most people think the suicides have stopped, but they haven't. We don't know how many it is at the moment, but we're talking well over 80. And the clue that something isn't right is that it's young boys and girls from 14 up, to young 20s. They're all hanging themselves. Right? Why is that significant? Males tend to hang themselves, females tend to take drugs, slit their wrists. Sorry about the subject, right? in South Wales and other places across the country, they're all hanging themselves. And we think we know why, or we're very sure we know why. Now the good news is, because of what we've done, this council 2 days ago voted nearly unanimously to remove a whole load of material which we had said was dangerous from their schools. So this council, given the right information, suddenly starts to think for themselves and do the right things. The one man who voted against the motion is a Tory councillor. Why would you want to vote against a motion trying to protect children from suicide? Right? So this is the good news, although the subject's not very nice. You want a glimpse of what they were pushing into the schools? And I'm not going to get too heavy into it tonight, but if anybody wants to research what that image represents, it's Molech.
So it's kind of that magical.
It's satanic.
Mm.
Okay? This is another image from the play. I don't like this because this man dressed up as a baby woman has got a baby in his arms, and I think the undertone is paedophilic. But if I produce a circle over here, you can't really see it in this light. This guy's got white underpants on, and in the crutch area, in red, it looks like blood. It's pretty gross, that picture, when you see it in the right colours. This is part of the play, absolutely horrific, being shown in Village Hall.
What age group?
What age group? 6?
Jesus.
6 through to adult. Now, what's even more outrageous is Rudry Village Hall a few years ago was collapsing. Then it suddenly got a £600,000 grant from the Welsh Assembly, and the moment they got the grant, in came the plays. Funny that, isn't it? Now these plays were spread all over South Wales, and the suicides run in a band across South Wales. And what Rhondda Council was given, along with many other councils, is, isn't it interesting that within a few months of these plays starting, the children started to commit suicide? This is a film company teaching 11 to 14-year-olds how to make horror films, paid for out of public money. National Lottery. We spoke to them last week, but they didn't want to really talk to us. Okay, so this stuff is real, it's going on, and the lottery money, a lot of it is being used to drive this stuff. Same company, this was a film made by youngsters, I think they were 13, and it was about a dog committing suicide. Going into schools. Okay? Now, the good news is that when people were alerted to what was really happening, they started to take the right action. And this is my point about the fishing net. Unless you see the networks, you can't really understand what's happening. I can tell you that not only has Common Purpose been operating in Plymouth and local schools, but the dark drama has also been operating in this part of the country because we've been warned about it by parents. Dark, unpleasant. And the Theatre Royal Workshops group that does a lot of training with children, we were alerted some years ago to one of their productions which was about long-term terminal illness, and they had 7, 8, 9-year-olds doing a whole performance about death and long-term illness in the family. And the mother complained because it started to adversely affect her daughter. It would, because that's what it was supposed to do. I should have a label up here of where we got this from, but this is another company which is teaching children how to make realistic hanging effects in plays. Okay? Department of Education not only knows this stuff is going on, they're helping to facilitate it. Now, is the government using these techniques on us to interfere with our minds? And the answer is absolutely, and we can prove it. Now I've got some copies of an old edition. I know they're a bit yellowed around the edges, but in the middle is this diagram, which is on screen, okay? And in the text either side is the explanation. So there's long articles. You can have one of these papers, but I'm just going to take you through the diagram, which I hope is going to work. Right, what you've got, this is the head of the government as it was. There's been some changes, which you'll see in a minute. So we've got Gus O'Donnell. I've forgotten this guy's name. It'll come up on the screen in a minute. We've got Cameron, Francis Moore, Julia Middleton. All right? They were running meetings with this little team, which included this man, who is a brain expert for the French government. They've been spending millions on this, okay? This is another guy involved with the government. His big society, and these are all the government departments. So if I try and blow it up a bit, it's going to work. Okay. Now, Gus O'Donnell has gone. Who's head of the civil service at the moment, do you know? Sir Bob Kersley, straight out of Rotten, Sheffield, to head of the civil service. He's absolutely common purpose. So we can put him in. He's replaced Gus O'Donnell. This is Jeff Mulgan. He's a Demos man, and also the Young Foundation, which is one of these change agents. And these people were creating the policy to run the government's behavioural change unit. And you can read all the details in the paper, because we discovered that they've been doing this with this man, Oliver Willier, a French expert, who is basically pumping ideas in so the British government could change the behaviour of people without us even knowing it. Yeah, the Soviets would have paid thousands of tons of gold for this type of stuff. This is David Halpin. He's the government's own expert on interfering with people's minds to get them to do things. Now they call it nudging, changing the language on a tax form so that people want to pay their taxes. Well, hang on a minute, maybe you don't want to pay your taxes, but they're playing around with words on the page to get you to pay your taxes. They're playing around with forms, they're playing around with signs. Have you seen the signs on the road? Think motorbike. You've seen those going into Plymouth? Right. What happens when you should be concentrating on the fact the car's braking in front of you and your subconscious is thinking motorbike? Very dangerous, this stuff. And this machinery all set up, and at the time we did this, we could already show that this lot was consuming tens of millions of pounds working to change the way people think and behave. And then if I go up to the top, this guy was Lord Wee, and he's effectively been replaced crudely by Eric Pickles. Big society. So big society is also about changing people's behaviour. Where it goes now. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. No, sorry, I'll have to go through the whole lot. Hang on.
There was a big thing with the Department of Work and Pensions when they brought Monster in, and I was on the dole on the social, and they brought in Monster, the big American company. I'd never heard of it. Well, I just thought it was a joke, and she couldn't. Her face.
It's not a joke.
No, but her face on the other side when I said, "Are you serious? Have you actually got a company called Monster?" And I've already been calling you a monster for weeks.
I'm going to come on to words in a minute. I don't know what the time is. I've got a watch on, so you might need to say get on, move on, or whatever. But okay, right. Now, what is the doctrine that's creating this mess? And it's this man, Saul Alinsky. This is his book, Rules for Radicals. He's dead now. but he was a Marxist agitator in America, and he was very clever because he said if you want to really destroy Western democracy, you've got to get into the grain of it, and then you've got to start collapsing things, getting people agitated, in fact, rubbing them raw, right? Victimise the victim. Very nasty man, and he dedicated that book to Lucifer. You buy a copy of it, you look inside the front cover, the book is dedicated to Lucifer. This man's ideas are now embedded in Conservative and Labour policy. That is a fact, because they're telling us it is. He advocated subversion by infiltration of political parties and institutions, and above all, the use of community organisers. Right, big society, according to everything that Conservatives have told us, is that it's directly based on community organising movement of Saul Alinsky in the United States. What they don't tell you is he was a Marxist agitator. And Alinsky was a student of Gramsci, and he believed you could get revolution in the state by steady, incremental subversion, patient gradualism. Common purpose are developing leaders who can lead beyond their direct area of authority, and although they may only seldom produce huge shifts, they will deliver the accumulation of many small ones. It's subversion, countries being collapsed deliberately. Now, this is the latest paper. So this is the one that's just out. I've probably got enough copies for all of you. Some of you have already got it. But in here, we've tried to do the same thing, and that is explain what big society is about. Okay? So that's the diagram. Should be able to blow it up. Oh, here he is, Saul Alinsky. Right, the government says they're going to empower the communities, they're going to have national citizen service pilots, they're going to open up public services, they're going to have a community first fund, they're going to have a social investment market and social action. And they've sold that as something good. They've written a document called the Compact, where it's all organised. They've set up big society capital to fund it, and the first 400 million they stole out of people's bank accounts. And of all the money that was sitting in bank accounts unclaimed, Cameron just said, I'm going to have it. Theft. They added 200 million, 400 million plus 200 million under the Merlin Agreement. And these banks have got their snouts in the pot running it. They're all corrupt. Load of big names. Interesting, Sir Ronald Cohen, NASDAQ, so he's a big commercial man, and an ex-member of the Bank of England, Richard Lambert. Now, I'm not, of course, saying they're corrupt, I'm simply saying what are they doing in this organisation. Now, this is what, okay, Alinsky, we don't want to forget him. There's a voice of what's happening so that everything's transparent. It's so transparent that the voice is solely funded by the Cabinet Office. They say if you go and look at Compact Voice, you can see what's going on. No, you can't, because it's funded by the Cabinet Office. It's controlled by the Cabinet Office. Here's all the money, the 400 million. They're pumping it into these intermediaries. And they're creating another network. Here's another phishing net. And a whole load of weird organisations are then creating community projects using community organisers. It's straight out of Alinsky. And what you're actually seeing is not people being empowered at the bottom, you're seeing the state control creeping down. That's why you've got the situation now where they're using Plymouth University to come in and train parish councillors. I don't need training, I didn't need training by Plymouth University, but you're now finding government bodies saying, oh, if you're going to become a parish councillor, you need to be trained. Well, of course they want to train you because they're going to nudge you. That's what it's about. District councillors are being trained. Now we've got so many talking about training MPs. And if they train the MPs, you won't be able to deal with the MPs at all, because they won't have their brains left anymore.
Excuse me, are you saying the co-op's been infiltrated as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Co-op, in my opinion, one of the most dirty organisations in the country. Are you aware of the Cooperative Party? Have you ever heard of it? Most Labour MPs get elected as MPs. They never declare to the electorate they're also members of the Cooperative Party. And if you delve into the corruption in Plymouth, where public land was handed over to unaccountable people, many of them had connections to the cooperative movement and the Cooperative Party. So the state, this is not empowering people. The big lie is that actually the state is putting these controls out on the ground. So now we've got another fishing net. We've got the big society organisers and the big society finance. So we put the lot together. We've got common purpose. We've got NLP, messing around with people's heads. Now we've got all the big society organisers. And we've got a load of very corrupt networks to do with the money. And this is why people can't breathe at the moment. Everywhere you turn, it's like there's something stopping you. And it's this. There's another very dangerous network, which I'm not going to go into in any detail, but you can get an old copy of the paper. This lady, Theresa May, unbelievably dangerous. She has set up a spying network on ordinary people that makes East Germany look stupid. And the key to it is a thing called MAPA, which I can't see where it is on here, but MAPA is the Multi-Agency Public Protection Arrangement. And it's a group of people from universities, the police, mental health, a whole load of other organisations that meet every month, and they have discussions about anybody in their area who's a problem.
To them.
They do.
Your name's on it. My name's on it.
Probably. Okay. Now, I've put up here the judiciary, because this could only happen through this woman because the judiciary is supporting it. And remember, Leveson is a QC. Everywhere you see this stuff happening, there are people who are barristers or silks or whatever. So there is a dictatorship forming, and they've got all of these organisations, including Common Purpose and the police, who are reporting on people. And organisations in Europe are also included in it. I'm not going to go there because I haven't got time. Now, if you want to stop this lot, what you've got to be able to do is find the networks. Once you find the network and tell people what the network is, they can deal with it. This is what they did in South Wales by simply understanding what the network around the suicide was. Now this is part of the network to do with big society. And I can't give it to you all because there's too much to it. But by simply going in, looking at the organisation, looking at who's involved and looking where their money comes from, you get part of the network. Then you go and look at that organisation. And when you plot it out, the same thing always happens. It's like roots of a tree. So eventually you say publicly, we don't want this organisation. I'm not allowed to use rude language. Bugger off. And the moment people tell these people to go away, their power gets taken away. But until you can see the net, you can't deal with it. Faces are good, because if you identify the faces of people, they get amazingly shy very quickly. We can phone up quite big companies. We're the UK column. Well, Lou's here, she's done a lot of it. So we're the UK column. I'm a reporter for a community newspaper. And you hear these people quite at the other end of the phone. Why? Because you're saying, I can see you. We know what you're doing. Where does your funding coming from? Well, I can't remember the organisation. I said, would you tell, I can't find it on your website. Could you tell me where your funding comes from? What do you mean? And I said, well, can you tell me where your funding comes from? Well, do you mean where we get our money from? Yes. Right, and this is because, whoomph, you're in there. And the moment you get that reaction, you're on target, and you're already starting to deal with it. The government does it as well. So this is me doing some research, but this is the Commission for the Compact. Do you remember on the diagram, the big society, the Compact? Do you know about these people? Third sector leaders, Action for Children, Black Training and Enterprise, British Red Cross, Brook, I don't even know what that is, Church Urban Fund, Equality and Diversity Forum, Morton CBS, Navica, Voice for Change, Volunteering for England. Do you know who these people are? These people are now directly influencing government policy. Did we give them any mandate? Is there any democracy? No. When you can see them, who's the local MP for this area?
No, strong.
Right. Well, Mr. Streeter, Conservative, is either insufficiently equipped from the point of mental acumen to understand this, or he simply doesn't want to know because he knows it's true. But at the moment, the Tory MPs are acting as if they don't know this is going on. And basically, I think their phone should be ringing every minute of the day. They should have somebody on their cases every minute saying, this is subversion, you are destroying the country. And then you're going to see them do that. It's got to happen. It goes on. Now, this is an example of just going onto the internet to follow this down. So you think you're ordinary citizens, people living in Buckfastleigh, and it's your town, and you organise your town. No, you're going to have these change community organisers come in and tell you how to do it. And this organisation, take a look at it on the internet. It is phenomenal. It will train 500 community organisers and supports a further 4,500 voluntary organisers in neighbourhoods across England. They're aiming to train 90,000 young people by the end of 2014. They are going to make Hitler Youth look like something, well, I don't know what. This is off their website where they're now putting maps to show where all their community organisers are. Many of these people won't realise what they're involved in.
Is it the same with the transition town?
Yes. And we haven't got time to go into it, but this policy directly links back to world government and the United Nations and Agenda 21. Right? These people are actually about destroying populations. And I've said it before, on camera and talks, people have said, what do these people want? They want to kill us. That's what's going on in the hospitals at the moment, it's euthanasia.
Yes, and also with the help of the pharmaceutical agenda.
Yeah, vaccines, family planning.
I've seen a lot of children, I've met a lot of children and families who said that their children had been assessed by the psychiatry. And say if a child wants to go out and play, in America, if it's seen running around a tree or trying to climb it, it's already diagnosed with a deficit disorder.
Yeah, that is now starting to happen in this country.
As a pretext.
I can say that somebody locally has had the experience of a child coming home with a letter, so this is a young child, 8, where one of the other children has got to have some attention from the psychiatrist, and they're nominating 2 other children to work with the special needs child, but they want the other 2 children to see the psychiatrist as well. Without mum and
to
dad
stimulate
present.
the pharmacy corporation, to stimulate the whole sustaining corporations, you know, the pharmacy can have a pretext of opportunity, provides a window of opportunity to introduce new drugs, continually expanding the field of
And we've been contacted for a long time from people from the NHS talking about what's really going on in the NHS. We've had doctors, nurses and what do you call the place where you get the medication from?
Right. Could we put
Those people saying we're killing people in the hospital.
Yeah, without the consent of the parents, they're deliberately using them as clinical trials.
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
But
Right.
sometimes with consent because the parents are not aware as well. Yeah.
But in ignorance, not realising the devastating effects.
In the early talks I did, when I did, it's changed quite a bit now. In some of the early talks, I can remember people sniggering in the room when I said these people want to kill you. I didn't have any problem with it because the moment you go into Marxist ideology, you could go into extreme fascism, but you go into these extreme ideologies, they murder people. And it's happening in this country. People are dying in police stations, people are dying in hospitals, because they are so elite, they actually do not care. Right? And we are now at the stage where either people are going to wake up pretty fast, or people are going to be very sad very quickly. I'm trying not to look too many things. We know what they're doing, and we can actually stop it by talking to other people. But we've got to use the right language. It's no good saying David Cameron is incompetent. He's not incompetent. He's an idiot who's being used. Clegg, my opinion, highly intelligent. He knows exactly what he's doing. Very dangerous man. And that is also an extreme socialist model, because the way they play it is the man you deal with is the upfront man. The real power in the party is number two. And that's what's going on in Westminster. Cameron, I don't think, has got a brain. He's just a puppet. Clegg, you watch him. He's the dangerous one. They get their activists out and they're reframed, nudged people. We've got a big problem. So here it is, big society. You can track through to Agenda 21, sustainable communities. It's all there. You can find all that yourself. But this is the key bit. The UN is pushing participatory democracy. That does not mean that individuals get their say. The people who get their say are the non-governmental organisations and stakeholders. Now, if you read documentation from Exeter City Council or Devon County Council or Plymouth City Council, all the documentation is full of stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? A mixture of public bodies, charities and non-government organisations. And they are making the decision. If you think back a little while ago, I think it was Cameron, but he was crowing because he'd been trying to do some policy, and he said, well, Bernardo's and NSPCC agree. So what?
So who are they? I mean,
Who are they?
Who sits on their board?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you who sits on Bernardo's board. People who are involved with making money out of putting children through so-called care facilities. Yeah. Now, we're not going to do a lot of this, but you've got all of this fishing net. Who's operating it? People who are low empathy. And I'm using that word deliberately because these people, if you take it much further, are psychopathic. They're liars, they're cheats, they don't even have a conscience if they're doing something wrong. They're running wars overseas, they've attacked Iraq, they've attacked Afghanistan, they've attacked Libya, they want to attack Iran. These are dangerous people. What are they doing? They're doing this. Any other company would have tracked this back through the system and had an investigation to see who downloaded it. Not in Parliament. Why? They want the perverts in Parliament. Why do you want perverts in Parliament? Because you can control them. And the control mechanism at the moment is paedophilia. It's very easy to prove. You can be an MP and use rent boys, Mr. Oates. You can be an MP and pose for homosexual partners in your underpants, Chris Bright, MP. You can be doing stuff with your mistress in Parliament, John Prescott. You can be doing drugs. Nobody's batted an eyelid. The one thing that the public still will not tolerate is paedophilia. And everything, and Louise is here, so she knows what comes through the UK Home Office. Throughout the country, people are screaming there are paedophile networks not being investigated by the police. And the reason that the top is not coming off Jimmy Savile is because Jimmy Savile was procuring children for people in positions of power. Right? A girl called Holly Gregg was viciously sexually abused many years ago now, but still recent enough to be dealt with. She's a Down syndrome girl. All of it covered up in Scotland. And the Scottish establishment has so far spent over £500,000 trying to close that case down. Why? Because the abusers included people in the establishment and judiciary. Right? Savile is exactly the same. And they are not investigating the people in Parliament. I've been in meetings in Westminster where police officers have talked about doing investigations into child prostitution, child trafficking and paedophilia, where they said in the rings were judges, politicians, lords, senior police officers, senior military people. They did all the investigation, produced the report. It all went quiet for 2 months and then they were told to drop it. Across the country, people who are informed are saying we are being ruled by a paedophile government. And that is why I flagged up Liberty, because we've got a woman associated with that, as Theresa May, who was campaigning for pornographic pictures of children. Jack Straw passed a law stopping children in care who were being abused speaking out to the media. Why would you do that?
His brother's on the list, though, isn't he?
His brother's on the list.
What do you mean, what list?
Well, there is a list circulating at the moment of people who've been involved in that sort of crime. So you might like to check out the Straw family. And this is the point. We're now at the stage in the UK where people are dying as a result of this. And it's really odd when you talk about it to some people, a wall goes up, they don't want to talk about it. We spoke to some people in a pub the other night, and at one point when it got on to something that was a bit challenging, the man suddenly said, "Are you Nazis?" What? We're saying, how come 1,000+ people are dying and nobody's been brought to trial? Well, this is why. Head of the NHS, communist trained. You train as a communist, you're always a communist. Fundamental rule during the Cold War. And he is promoting communist policy. Why? Because he's not a Tory. He's something different. Who was controlling the boss of the NHS? Well, this is the main man. He's a QC. He's into genetically modified foods. He's into commercial stuff. And if you look at the 19 people on the NHS Commissioning Board, they have nothing to do with caring for people. They're to do with vicious corporate organisations. That's why they protected him, because he knows the government agenda is to destroy the NHS. This is the main man. Chair of the government's 20-member Agriculture and Environment Technology Commission, lead on GM and the growing of GM crops. What's that got to do with treating people in the hospital? What about this idiot?
Sorry.
William Hague. What? He wants to improve the situation in Syria by arming the rebels. The rebels that the national press has already said are connected to Al-Qaeda. But hang on, Al-Qaeda are the bad guys, aren't they? They're lying. So he wants a proper war in Syria. Right? British politician. He wants a proper war. Looks like a thug, really, doesn't it? Don't mention the Iraq War, William Hague says to the cabinet. Why not? Because it was on a lie. So we've got a British government involved in genocide. All of them. Tories, Lib Dems. This is the result. I don't have any problem about service people going and doing the right thing if necessary and dying. I was very lucky, I didn't even get shot at. So I'm not squeamish in the point of view, you go and do the job, run the risk of getting hurt. But if you go and do the job for an utter lie, somebody needs to pay. What are we talking about? He's the man, somewhere between 110,000 violent deaths and 1 million. Nobody knows. Tony Blair's still walking the streets. This lady, do you remember, killed the 2 children in Spain? We're in communication with her. We have been for a long time. Her story is extraordinary. She killed the children because she knew by her own work in social services, if social services took them, they were highly likely to be abused. What do I mean? Passed into paedophile rings. She got 30 years. Tony Blair is walking the streets. Bomb went off last couple of days in Iraq. And this is the lie, which really bugs me, because the BBC perpetuated this lie. This is the Berlin Wall. Right? Now, in my career in the military, which was all Cold War, the other side of that wall was a vicious regime, tied in with East Germany, but also the Warsaw Pact and Soviet Union. I'm seeing all the reports, I'm seeing the weapons, I'm seeing the vicious police state, we're seeing the gulags, we're seeing people put into mental institutions. And then one evening I come home and the BBC says, it's all over, the wall's come down. Well, where did all the bad guys go? So I'll tell you where the bad guys went. They went straight through the hole in the wall. Because if you read documents now talking about the EU, they're talking about creating an EU from the Urals to the Atlantic. The ideology is extreme socialism. And this is the biggest lie the BBC has ever told. The physical wall came down, the ideology was absolutely intact because they knew what they were going to do. Right, good news. This is what we live in. Yeah? So we divide it up with a few people, ordinary people, the majority of society, ordinary good people. Some of them work possibly a bit harder or they get on. We've got professionals, starts to get a bit dodgy then. We've got Westminster, it's getting really dodgy now. We've got the judiciary, it's getting very dodgy. We've got the bankers, now it's getting really dodgy. And then at the top, a lot of people worry about who's at the top. Not interested. Why am I not interested? Don't need to know, because we can deal with those people without ever knowing who they are. So if I put in the bad guys, very crude, I reckon at ordinary level, most people are good. Yeah, okay, they speed or they have a few too many beers or they fall out, but in general, most people are good. But something happens as you go up the pyramid, people who climb higher up, that's where the dodgy bank deals are done, that's where the psychopaths are, that's where you crush other people. So I reckon that if we're optimistic, we've got a huge pyramid here of good people. Right, now Saul Alinsky, we've been talking about, says how you take control. Start at the bottom, amongst ordinary people, and get them doing the right thing. So it's as good as I could do it. If we do the right thing at the bottom, we end up taking control of the whole lot. And this is the key bit. We need to get Westminster back. It's no good voting for parties. They are all rotten. A lot of people getting excited at UKIP at the moment. I left UKIP 8 years ago because they wouldn't tell the truth on the finances. They have still not told the truth. I don't have any problem with ordinary members. The top of the tree, rotten. And I believe they're controlled with the Tories. I'm probably going to upset a lot of people if that film goes out. There we are. Right, this is what we've got to do. We've got to create our own network. And what is that network? That's people telling the truth. All these people out here, these little houses, they're all asleep. They've no idea. And it's no good saying to them, your taxes are going to go up, they're going to charge for you to go on the road. You've got to say to them, if you don't wake up, you're going to be in a camp, because that's what's coming. You can prove some of the higher level stuff. This is a document, United Nations documents for teachers. When joining the UN, staff members take an oath not to seek or receive instructions from any government or outside authority. Just think about that. We've got British or American people involved with the UN. Who do they work for? The UN. And all the policy coming through, leading beyond authority, comes directly from the UN. Here's the good guys. How many of you know about 600 people on the streets of Liverpool? Do you know that happened? Do you know a judge was arrested in Liverpool?
We were there.
Birkenhead. He was breaking the law because he was running an unlawful court. There were 600 people. We were there. Peaceful demonstration. There were police handlers. There were police vehicles. Not one word on the news. The judge was arrested. Of course, he wasn't harmed or anything. Within a matter of 2 months, he no longer works in the court anymore. He's retired. But the experience scared the living daylights off him. It was a sunny day, and just for the impact, a lot of people brought umbrellas. Over 600 people. Not a mention on BBC or ITN News.
It did have about 11 seconds on the local Liverpool radio.
Yeah. Okay. The reason it didn't get any publicity is because the government knows that if ordinary people take the right action, they're finished. Want to stop what your council's doing? Don't pay your council tax. It's that easy. Right, how to recognise a fishing net. Any of these words in a website or document, you're on to something. Thought leadership, this is quite a big one. Okay, they want to control your thoughts. People who are embedded in it talk about this. Cohorts is just a funny word. We never used it in English till the EU got involved. Here's your community organisers and activists. They're collaborating. This used to be a word associated with the Soviet bloc. It's now come into mainstream government language. Common purpose. If you press the case, they call you vexatious. So if you really keep pressing the button, then have you had this?
I this morning got a mail off local council groups. They have accused me of being egotistical. They have accused me of being unmovable, real trouble. And they're beginning. But they start off with, oh, we love you.
Yeah.
We think you're great. I'm only asking for simple things, but it seems to be
You're
impossible.
asking for the wrong things.
Yes, I'm asking for proof of authority, and I'm asking for who is holding that authority. And they can't give me those two simple things, and therefore I've got nobody I can contract with. And it's a nightmare.
That's the blocking out. Right, weird names. Actually, that should be COCO, COCO. That's part of the community organisers. If you see a sort of weird corruption of a name, you might have capitals and lowercase together, or sometimes you've got numerals instead of TO, you've got the letter 2. Usually a very good clue that that organisation's on the wrong side. Bit of a generalisation. This one, very nasty, unlimited. NGOs. Anybody know what heteronormativity is? They're talking about that a lot.
Yeah.
This is the concept that it's not normal to be heterosexual. Because actually, it's only normal to be anything, bisexual, homosexual.
Of course, I mean, flipping heck, yeah.
And where are they going with this?
Gay world.
The whole world. But we're also seeing...
Quite handy if you want to wipe everyone out.
Pardon?
Quite handy if you want to wipe everyone out.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that is true. But we also know child attractive. This is a new term for paedophiles. It sounds nice, doesn't it? Nudging, the compact, mapper I've talked about, big society, change. If everything keeps changing, that's revolution. That's why at the moment, as soon as one rule comes in, another one comes in. Schools, change, change, change. Hospitals. And everybody's saying, I don't know what's going on, because you're not supposed to. Experiential, this is where they're playing with your mind. Partnership, that blurs the boundaries. Where are you accountable? Now you have a group of people, the police, the local council, the local university working in partnership. So they make a decision where somebody gets hurt. Who's responsible? If you cause problems, we've now got to the stage where people have been told they're a nobody. Yeah, you don't exist. We're not even. So you've got somebody in the local council saying you've caused a problem, you don't exist.
Funny thing is, just because of the nature of what I do, they're finding that they can't ignore me, and that's a funny situation I've got at the moment. So that's why I say I'm looking at it in a different way.
Yeah. Right. These are all things which are happening in schools at the moment. And they are really going for school children at the moment. Creative visualisation is NLP for school children. And some teachers have been warning about it to the extent they've said that their colleagues have had problems themselves with having adverse effects as a result of the NLP. Show and tell. Getting young children to talk about what's happening at home. And a granddad gave me a classic example. His young granddaughter had said that she got bitten. At school, she said she got bitten by the dog. What she didn't tell them was the dog bit her because she wasn't watching what she was doing, came down the stairs and stepped right on the dog's head. But she's telling class, I got bitten by the dog, round comes social services, they take the girl. So there's some really circle time is playing around with the kids' heads, meditation is playing around with the kids' head. This is a project that's been promoted in some of the academy schools, which says it's good for for children to understand the touch of adults. Diversity training is not about getting black and white people to be in harmony. It does the opposite. It trains them to have friction. And this is why the police are having big problems at the moment. Anti-bullying is to teach children about bullying. No winners at sports day is to dumb children down, to take away the competitiveness. No conkers is just bonkers, that's just the trouble. These are very dangerous, where they're sifting out bright and gifted children. The reason they want the bright, gifted children is they're easier to brainwash. Youth parliaments, same thing. This is communist. Debating a view the child does not hold. That is absolutely screwing with their minds. All of this is going on in local schools. Here's the nasty drama. Visioning is another name for NLP for school children. This is all about getting children into the mould that there's, we need GM crops. Role swapping, boys with babies, girls and rugby. This is about trying to destroy normal heterosexual relations. Filmmaking we've talked about. Sex education is to sexualise the children at an early age. That's what it is about. Who was telling me about dark reading material? It was you again, wasn't it? So you've got an example of what was she, 13?
12. Just turned 12, 11, 12.
And at school she's reading pornography.
Off the school library list, which they have a special list where they can go into the library and then they can go and pick a book out of that list. And I don't read, that type of adventure, your whatever they are, horrible novels, shades of whatever. But you see, this is coming out on the children, and it was extremely, extremely explicit about a teenage relationship with all details very... I couldn't believe it. And
Louise came home from school the other day and said about on the list, on her recommended reading list, she's 11, The Hunger Games is one of the ones that they're recommending 11-year-olds to read, and that is a film about children going into an arena, fighting each other to the death.
with only one surviving. So, you know, this is frightening, and they are being exposed to it in an extreme.
This is Illuminati training.
It is. No, I haven't, because I have to judge the audience, and this is a pretty heavy presentation that I'm doing tonight. We could. I'm happy to talk about those things. I'll just finish the last couple of slides here. But for me, if you want to say what this is, the agenda is satanic. Right? There's no ifs or buts. You're talking about promoting death, these care pathways, death pathways. You're talking about vicious abuse of children. You're talking about messing with people's minds. That's satanic. And in some ways, we don't need to talk about the Illuminati by saying the people at the top of the pyramid are these people, because we can bring down the pyramid without even knowing who they are. If ordinary people would just do the right things, common sense, tell the truth, get back to some morality, we're all guilty of slipping a bit here and there. If we all did the right things as the body of the public, and we've got criminals in Westminster, they need to be brought to book, society would come back on the right level. But it isn't coming back on the right level at the moment because people don't understand what's happening around them. When you actually see it for what it is, it's pretty easy now to stop it. Devon County Council gets told, we don't want any taxpayers' money spent on these quangos. Who wants to chop the money off it? That's the God. You know? Right, these are some of the things of meeting people who are not acting normally, meeting people who just repeat little sound bites. We went to Ivy Bridge Police Station to report that a 3-month-old baby was going to be abused in another area. And the woman sergeant kept saying, so you want to make a complaint? I said, no, we're trying to prevent a crime where a baby is going to be abused. So you want to make a complaint? No, we want to stop a crime taking place. In the end, we gave up. We couldn't talk to her. And this is because she's repeating sound bites, because you are asking her to do something she's effectively been programmed not to do. When the 3-month-old baby has been abused, we went into Charles Cross Police Station with photographic evidence. And do you know what happened? There were 3 of us went into the interview room. We ended up with a male sergeant shouting, "Get out of my interview room!" But we've come to report that a child has been abused. You get out of this interview room now. Why? Because the police are involved. He was a very frightened man. Right? So when people do strange things, a conversation where another person speaks another language. We've had a mother saying, I was trying to tell an authority this was happening, and they just didn't take any notice. It was like I was talking a foreign language. It's because they've been programmed. Personality changes. Police NHS people are talking about this all the time. Being aggressive. People becoming depressed. People acting like machines. Strange language. Worklessness. Have you seen that word before? It's in all the government documents. People lacking emotion.
That's a big one, actually. That's a big one. The people, the absolute shut-off.
Yeah.
Because I come across that a lot.
Yeah. Well, actually, maybe I'll just leave that one up, and then we'll do that. So, I've really hit you very hard, and I haven't done this talk before. But if you want to stop what's happening, if we want to stop what's happening, we have to see how things are being done. And it isn't just the question that you've got politicians who are bent and useless. They are not driving this policy. The policy is being driven through the public sector. Yeah? And these are very, very dangerous people. If you say, what do they want to achieve? At the moment, they want to completely collapse the country. Because if they collapse it into a state of chaos, in is going to come the really heavy stuff. And that's what the Conservatives mean by changing out of chaos. I'm going to stop now.
Order out chaos.
Yeah.
Order out.
Thank you.